Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Global Exchange Podcast. This is the second video on my series about the NSLI-Y program, and it's going to be focusing specifically on the interview, which is the second part of your application process. If you haven't already checked out the video on everything that happens before you go to your host country and the entire pre-departure process, make sure to check that video out because there is a lot of information in there about more than just the interview. So this video is going to be focusing specifically on that part. The first piece of information I wanted to give you guys is what the NSLI-Y interviewers and the administration are actually looking for. So as I discussed in my previous video, it's really important that students are adaptable, eager to face new challenges, and open-minded because you're living in a foreign country and all of these things are really important because it's not going to be like home. So when you're answering these interview questions, you really want to have that in the back of your mind and make sure you really emphasize that every chance you can get. A common question that the NSLI-Y interviewers might ask you is about something as simple as food or your host family. So say, for example, the NSLI-Y interviewer asks you, what would you do if you encountered a food that you've never tried before and looked unfamiliar and you were unsure of trying it? What should you do? Even if you're a picky eater, I'm certainly not, but even if you are a picky eater, you always have to emphasize that you have that open-mindedness. So in the case of this question, you would always answer that you would have an open mind and try the food, because that is what is important in a study abroad exchange program like NSLI. The second piece of information I wanted to give everyone going through this process right now is that it's not enough to say you're simply dependable or trustworthy or independent or any one of those traits that I mentioned earlier. You always have to have a story to back up what you're saying. Just think about how much more convincing it would be if you actually had a real life example when you demonstrated one of these traits that NSLI-Y administrators and interviewers are looking for. So for example, in my interview, I showed how I was even-tempered and calm in terms of conflict resolution by telling a story how I had a roommate who was incompatible with me at another summer program, but how we were able to discuss our problems and make sure that everything worked out in the end. So just small examples like this from your everyday life can work to show how you are demonstrating all of these traits that NSLI-Y administrators are looking for. So don't feel like you have to make anything so over the top or made up, because that really shows, and NSLI-Y administrators can tell when you're lying about things like this just to make an impression. So don't feel like you have to make anything up. Just use examples from your everyday life that show what type of person you are. The third most important piece of information that you have to know going into these interviews is that you should just treat it as a conversation between you and the other person and not something so fancy. The people who are giving these interviews are usually ex-study abroad alumni themselves or people who are just really passionate about language learning, and they want to see those qualities in you too. So if you can just demonstrate this and make a mutual connection with the other person based on something you both enjoy, like learning new languages or traveling or studying abroad, then that would really work well for you. So don't treat this as some high stakes thing, even though it really is. You should just treat this as a conversation between you and a friend, or you and someone who's interested in the same thing as you, basically. This goes for all interviews, not just the NSLI-Y interview, but prepare. And the way I started off preparing for this interview is by looking over my essays. And this is really important because you don't want to contradict yourself in what you said in your essays, because you don't know if the NSLI-Y interviewer does have access to those essays. and I'm still not sure if they do, but it's very good to be prepared in that sense. Second, the second way I prepared was to review questions with my family members or anyone who might be available to help you practice. So you want to go over questions such as, how do you deal with challenges? How do you resolve conflict? Why do you want to go to this specific country and study this language? And questions like that. And the last piece of advice that I have for all students applying for NSLI-Y and going through the interview process, and this might sound cheesy, but it is to have a positive mindset. If you go into the interview having the mindset that, oh, this is such a selective program, I'll never have a shot of getting in, then you'll give off a bad impression, like you're not interested in being there, or you're not as enthusiastic as other kids. So you really want to make sure that you have a positive mindset and just remember why you even applied to NSLI-Y in the first place, and have your mind set on that goal of traveling to a different country and learning a different language in your mind throughout all stages of the application process. And if you do this, it'll really distinguish yourself from other students and really show out in your application and help you get towards that end goal. So these are all the most important things that I found out when going through this process. But if you guys have any more specific questions, please leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to answer any questions you might have. Please also subscribe and like the video, and it really motivates me to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching.